Okay, 9 o'clock. We have Board of Selectmen meeting today, May 27th in the Great Hall. The meeting's being recorded by Area 58 and being recorded on Zoom as well. Start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So on the meeting, the board is holding this meeting under allowance for emergency meetings under the Massachusetts Open Meeting Law. Discussions and possible reconsideration of decisions made at the May 25th, 2021 Board of Selectmen concerning decisions on the process for annual appointments, whether to interview one or more current office holders, whether to eliminate any preference for reappointment of current office holders, whether to vote on reappointments of one or more current office holders, and if no appointment is made, then review applications for these positions, whether to interview all applicants for one or more offices along with interviewing current office holders, whether to advertise, recruit, and pay for all appointed positions with terms expiring on June 30th, 2021, including but not limited to building commissioner, inspector of buildings, building inspector assistant, police chief, sealer of weights and measures, town accountant, town council, veterans agent.
Gordon, just, I don't know where your mic is. It's on. The problem is that if we're not very close to the mics.
Okay. Police chief, sealer of weights and measures, town accountant, town council, veterans agent, wiring inspector assistant, and to vote as to whether to appoint the following individuals for the following positions and terms: Robert Piccarelli, building commissioner / inspector of buildings, term to expire on June 30th, 2024. William Kelly, building inspector assistant, term to expire on June 30th, 2022. John Chaves, police chief, term to expire on June 30th, 2024. David Moore, sealer of weights and measures, term to expire on June 30th, 2022. Sandra Nolan, town accountant, term to expire on June 30th, 2024. Larry Mayo, town council, term to expire on June 30th, 2022. Wilfred Corey, veterans agent, term to expire on June 30th, 2022. Stephen Peterson, wire inspector, term to expire on June 30th, 2022. Dennis McInnes, wiring inspector assistant, term to expire on June 30th, 2022. And then the meeting information for Zoom. So is there a motion to reconsider the vote?
I move that we reconsider vote to take it on.
I second.
Okay. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, passes. Okay, what is the decision of the board? Do you want to nominate one by one? We have a list of letters that came in from town current appointees that want to be reappointed.
I, for one, vote that we rescind the vote that was taken and that we appoint them as their recruiter. None of the people have shown that they caused any problems with not being able to do their job over the past years that I've been here. We've never had a problem with individuals.
Troy and everybody else, the mics really need to be close to you. Thank you. Well, then,
That's all right, I'll move up closer. Excuse me. Inasmuch as there not any complaints or written evidence that any of these individuals are not doing their jobs, I vote that we appoint them as listed.
Is there a second? Not hearing a second. Is there another motion?
I motion we go individually down the list.
Is there a second? I'll second. All right. So, does everyone have a list?
Gordon, you didn't vote.
Oh. All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Against?
No.
Okay, motion passes. So, is there a motion?
Gordon, just to note that you do have, I mean, you may already have read them, but you do have letters from a number of the individuals indicating their interest in being reappointed. I don't know if you want to enter those into the record or not.
Is there a motion to do so?
Gordon, just so you know, you have, I don't know.
Could I speak for a minute? I have a question about the emergency meeting.
Yep.
Thank you.
Please
My
stay.
name is Phil from Valley, and we're
Sir,
You gotta go to a
Take
mic.
it close to the mics.
It should be loud enough without it. Anyway, we just had an election in town. We've got some new selectmen on board. I'm trying to understand within a week, whatever, we have an emergency meeting called by the selectmen for a discussion, I guess, about this. But my question becomes, this is a school day, this is a work day. How are people supposed to come to give their opinions to the selectmen in this town when this is all we have representing the town?
I understand what the question is about the emergency meeting. The emergency meeting was called because the way the motion was done Tuesday night, it was requested that all of these positions be posted and advertised.
Okay, so you...
So we have a contract with the police chief. So the only way to stop that process was to hold this emergency meeting because we tasked the town administrator with posting these positions by tomorrow. So he would have had to have this done today.
Okay. Now, why didn't we do it on Saturday when people are more available to discuss it? This is an important thing for this town. And you've called an emergency meeting on a work day.
So in order to stop the deadline from happening, we had to call the meeting.
Okay, now you mentioned the police chief. What about all these other people you've listed?
So all the other positions are up for appointment. There's no contract with them, but there is with the police chief.
Okay, so why aren't we addressing the police chief in an emergency meeting and addressing this in a normal town meeting where everyone can come in on a weekend or something? I don't understand.
So what we did was we took a vote on Tuesday night to post all the positions. When this was brought to our attention by the town administrator suggested we have an emergency meeting to talk about this. So that's what we're doing, is having the emergency meeting to talk about this.
Okay, how do the people in the town who have to work, make a living, and especially after going through COVID for the last year, form and base their opinion on the changes you're making to the town? Now, this town has had a problem for a long time with the infighting. It's worse than the government between the Democrats and the Republicans. It needs to stop. We're a community, we're a town, we work together. I've never seen anything like this in the things I've heard around this town. So now we've got people we're putting in that want to have a say in the town. What about the people having a say in the town?
So the people did have a say in the town. They
object to an emergency meeting on a work day as a citizen.
I understand that, but the people elected the selectmen to make the decision on the appointments. The process had a hiccup. We're trying to fix that.
Yes, but you're doing it in secrecy in my mind because where are the people in the town?
So
how many residents do we have in this town, do you know?
Around 8,000.
Right. How many people in this room right now?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
You know,
7,
you can give an
8, 9,
approximate.
10,
There's 30 people maybe in this town, and a lot of people have to be here.
Yep.
So you're putting the town and making decisions for this town with 25 people out of 8,000. I object to that.
I understand, sir, but the appointments are made by the Board of Selectmen. There doesn't have to be any public input for this.
Okay, then maybe there's other changes that need to happen.
Understood.
So my objection is noted, you've had a secret meeting.
It's not secret.
It's not an emergency meeting.
It's an
during the
Sir, it's an emergency meeting because the board put a deadline on the action that the town administrator had to take. So the board can just rescind that motion and the deadline's gone. And that's what happened.
Okay, you've had your opinion. I've given my opinion.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes.
Gordon, can I speak? Thank you. Hi, I'm sure you all know me, Linda Cole. I just wanted to make sure, I sent you all an email and I wanted to make sure that all the Board of Selectmen had got it. I just want to speak to the fact of, almost from a human resources, I know we don't have it in this town, but standpoint of the ramifications of this decision, because it could be very costly to the town and the residents. Without proper documentation to not reappoint somebody, you risk lawsuits, as well as, for sure, if we just don't reappoint them because we're claiming that they don't do their job well enough,
So,
they're going to get unemployment. That's unfightable.
so I talked to council about this. The appointment ends on that date. There is no guarantee of continued employment for those positions. So that-
Correct, but you do, but the person can come back, has the right to, could come back and have the right to choose to fight it on the basis that there was no grounds not to reappoint, that they haven't done a bad job.
But there is no requirement that the board appoint. Appointments have a certain
I agree with you,
end
there's
date.
no requirement. I'm just saying the possibility of what you're opening the town up to, as well as, I know for a fact that the unemployment, unfortunately, because we've had cases where people are let go because they can't do the job, and we would all agree that they can't do the job. However, they're still going to get unemployment because you do. A lot of people aren't aware of that. That's something you can't fight. They automatically get it. So I just want to make sure that everybody knew the cost that is possible, let alone the advertising. I mean, now I know you're talking about maybe individual votes, which would help on the advertising costs, because the advertising costs would be extreme for this amount of people, and what you have to include in the advertisement and how long you have to advertise for. But I just wanted to make sure before you make any decisions that you're aware of the cost to the town and the residents.
Okay.
Thank you.
Amy?
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to ask, how long has this been the process that selectmen appoint people to positions in the town? How long, is it new?
At least 31 years.
So are we just finding out about it, and that what maybe is what is alarming everybody, is that they didn't know that this is what's been going on for 31 years, right?
At least.
Thank you. Actually, one more question. Which one of you called this meeting?
I did.
You did? Okay.
So right now, Charlie, with that motion to reconsider that vote, and we reconsidered the vote, there's no deadline, correct?
Well,
There's no deadline for you
I
to act.
I assume by the end of the meeting, you'll give whatever orders you want to give
Okay.
in terms of, because I gave you an analysis for the three groups of people. We had dealt with the paid positions with terms expiring on June 30th. We had also dealt with the several open seats that are currently on boards and commissions where nobody's there. For instance, we have a vacancy on the elementary school committee, we have a vacancy on the Board of Health, we have vacancies on the Finance Committee, and you give me a schedule to follow for that. And then we had everybody else where they are unpaid positions on boards and commissions. Their terms are up, but we have people on there, and you also had told me what you wanted to follow in terms of a schedule for advertising, notifications, things like that, setting up interviews. And I would expect by the end of this meeting, either you'll say, Charlie, this is correct, and we want you to do that, or you'll say to me, we want to do something different.
Okay. So we're going to go one by one. So for the first one, I have to recuse myself. So Troy.
Building Commissioner, Inspector of Buildings. Do you have any questions there?
Nope.
Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Do you have any questions, Ashley?
I do not.
I have one question, and that's to the building inspector. Why do you feel you should be reappointed?
I feel I've always done my job to the best of my ability. If it's the board's decision, I'd like to know where they feel I haven't done my job. I love this community. I live in this community. It's a thankless job, as well as the police, because it's enforcement. So no matter what decision I make, 50% is going to be wrong in the eyes of the public. Unfortunately, in the environment we live in, that 50% has become much more. So again, I do the job to the best of my ability. Show me where I haven't done it, and I would like to keep the position.
Sarah, you got something you want to say?
Yes, thank you. My name is John Day. I serve as counsel for Mr. Piccarelli with regard to this matter of his reappointment. Just as a threshold matter, I would raise an objection to Selectwoman DeSista's involvement in this particular part of the proceeding. The reason I say that is she just won election to her position after waging a campaign that was full of personal accusations against Mr. Piccarelli, both personally and in his capacity as a building inspector. Now, obviously, that was protected speech within the context of a political campaign. But now she's an elected town official, and I would respectfully suggest that she has a conflict of interest given the manner in which she just raised her campaign by attacking Mr. Piccarelli, with coming in now and voting on whether or not he should be reappointed. I'd further note that Section 3514 of this town's plan for employment and compensation and personnel says that the Board of Selectmen are obligated to engage in employment procedures with, quote, uniform interpretation and application. And the reason I point that out is, as was noted a few moments ago, this process of reappointing employees has been going on for at least 31 years. My understanding is this is the first time that a decision such as was made the other night by the Board of Selectmen was made. So it's a new set of circumstances. Again, given what I would suggest are the impermissible conflicts of interest, I can't imagine the Massachusetts Ethics Commission allowing Ms. DeSesta to vote on Mr. Piccarelli's reappointment given the campaign that was just mounted. I would respectfully suggest that it's virtually impossible for the Board of Selectmen to have been found that they were engaging in a uniform interpretation and application of their own rules and own bylaws as it pertains to Mr. Piccarelli. Now, Town Council, I've been advised, has rendered a general opinion that as a general course, employees at the end of their term are entitled to are entitled or not to be reappointed. That's a general principle which I don't necessarily contest, but there are specifics engaged in this particular proceeding. Again, the nature in which Ms. DeSesta mounted a large part of her recent campaign by attacking Mr. Piccarelli raises serious legal concerns as to whether or not she can fairly and impartially and with uniform interpretation and application rule on this case. So for that reason, as a threshold matter, I would respectfully request that she recuse herself from this proceeding because she cannot be fair and impartial. Moving more substantively to the qualifications of Mr. Piccarelli, he was unanimously appointed to his position in 2015, unanimously reappointed in 2018. There's no record of disciplinary history against him. He's performed his duties faithfully, dutifully, and without any documentation or any record of malfeasance or misfeasance. He's fully qualified for the position. That's been noted in his last 2 appointments, and there are no grounds not to reappoint him. So again, applying the town's own obligation to uniformly interpret and apply its rules with regard to appointment of town officials and town employees, I would respectfully urge the town to, or the Board of Selectmen, to reappoint Mr. Piccarelli pursuant to the email I sent this morning and the request he sent yesterday afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. The only problem we have is if the individual spoken about recused himself from it, then there's no vote. That's a majority of the board.
That creates a problem, Selectman Guerin. I recognize that, but I think that the practical concerns here of the board's problem with regard to, I think, only having one person, that would be you, who can fairly and impartially resolve this matter. That problem has to be secondary to Mr. Piccarelli's right to be reappointed. He's done nothing to not be reappointed. This is a political vendetta. This is a political move to try to take his job away from him, even though he's dutifully performed his job for the past 6 years. So I would defer to town council as to what the town's official position would be, but I think I can tell you that, from my perspective, under the circumstances, which are unique, you could be qualified to render the only vote on this matter because you're the only one who is not conflicted out by any ethical considerations with regard to Mr. Piccarelli. But I would respectfully suggest again that Mr. Sessa does have a conflict of interest that would not pass muster with the Massachusetts Ethics Commission or any of the applicable statutes that are applied by that commission. She has not only, I would argue, an actual conflict of interest, given the campaign she just waged, but she's also prohibited from engaging in activity that leads to an appearance of a conflict of interest. And while I'm confident the Ethics Commission would find an actual conflict of interest, again, given the things that she said out in social media and elsewhere during the course of her campaign, I'm confident that rises to the level of an actual conflict, but I think it's beyond anybody's reasonable interpretation. It raises the appearance of a conflict of interest. There's no way the townspeople of Halifax can believe that she can rule on this matter or vote on this matter impartially and fairly, given the manner in which she spent a recent campaign repeatedly attacking Mr. Piccarelli.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Bert.
Hi, good morning. Bert Gaynor, 17 Pembroke Way. I just wanted to say, as far as Mr. Piccarelli, I've had experience working with him for the last 6 years. I think his knowledge of the field, his attention to detail, I've had experience as far as dealing with contractors, as well as personal people applying for petitions and whatnot. I've never heard a bad word said about this gentleman. He's extremely knowledgeable. He can not only deal with the people, the applicants themselves, and even those that they feel that are aggrieved and that he's misinterpreted. Mr. Piccarelli will do his homework. He'll find out about the code. He'll interpret the code. His follow-up as far as sending letters off and whatnot, keeping the Zoning Board of Appeals aware of the decision making. I've witnessed him personally dealing with not only the applicants and the contractors, but also with attorneys, who he's able to sit down with our own attorney, explain each step that he's taken, how he interprets it. I'm not saying he's infallible, he knows everything, he's not always been right, but he's open to hear the interpretations from different people. Extremely professional. I've enjoyed working with him in the past. Just, I think it'd be a loss to the town if we didn't reappoint Mr. Piccarelli. Just my own personal opinion. Thank you.
Anyone else? Is there a motion?
Charlie, so if I recuse myself from this, power of necessity, no? Kicks
Well,
in?
there's a rule of necessity. Obviously, Attorney Day feels that Mr. Guerin is the only person who can vote on this. I'm not an attorney. My understanding is it requires a quorum of the board to vote. If you're not voting, we no longer have a quorum. That's why the rule of necessity is in place. But that's my, you could always, I'll leave it at that.
I motion to hold the building inspector until we speak with town council.
Don't look at me, look at the crowd.
That's right.
You want to hold the decision on reappointment until you speak to town council?
Yep.
We've had sufficient evidence put forward that the person is doing the job and has done the job. And I understand that some people may be upset, being irate because decisions weren't made in their direction. But the fact is that he has made numerous decisions and very few have come back as a lawsuit or any complaint.
I mean, after Attorney Day just sat up here and said all he had to say about me, I'm not voting on this today. So,
So moved.
So Troy, you're seconding?
Second.
Okay. Are you setting a date for this coming back to another meeting? Are you going to intend to talk to town council between now, for instance, and June 1st or another date? And I guess my question is, at some point, when you say talk to town council, does that
so we'll
mean
move it to
that
Tuesdays.
Ashley does the board do?
Let's move it till Tuesday's meeting and then I'll talk to Larry.
Okay. So, yeah, so what would happen is you have a move and you have a second to table this until the meeting on June 1st. In the meantime, you'll talk to town council about.
If I have to recuse myself or not.
And then if you do have to recuse yourself, also the question probably should be asked to town council. If you have two members recusing themselves, how does the rule of necessity work in that? And
Right.
whether Mr. Guerin can be the only person voting on it.
Correct.
Yes.
I have a question. Is everybody just being up to be appointed? Are we just looking for applications to interview people and have a choice on all of them? Is that what's going on?
Well, in all honesty, I've never went through this process in the time that I've sat on the board. The board has appointed without information from the audience or anything of that nature. It's based on evaluations, determinations, and whether or not there's anything legal or anything that's going on with that individual at the time.
Okay. So isn't it just about interviews? Because like, for instance, on the beautification committee, we had a landscaping contract up. It wasn't anything against CMAC, but we went out to get bids just to be ethical and honest and give everybody a shot at sponsoring the Peg Fitzgerald Garden. So they ended up being the only bidder, but we put it out there to the community to see if anybody else would be interested in it. And that's merely opening it up in democracy and transparency and saying, hey, listen, here's all these positions that are available in the town of Halifax. Anybody who's looking for a job who might be interested in one of these jobs can throw in an application and have an interview. I would actually say that would be the proper process for anything to make sure that we are being open and honest with the Halifax residents and taxpayers.
Are you saying that we have not been open and honest about what's going on?
No, I'm just saying, like, it'd be a great
What you're
thing.
talking about is talking about a contractor, someone outside of the town that's doing work because of a bid.
Well, isn't it a good thing to have choice?
You know
So
something?
it's not personal, I just think that it should be done every year.
Well,
It should be done every year. That's my opinion. We just found out about it now, right? This is the first time I knew about all these appointings. So it's an enlightening thing.
unfortunately, there are individuals who don't show up at town meeting or selectmen's meetings or anything that makes themselves aware of what's going on behind the scenes.
I have
And
it.
they're-
I have it.
So, we will vote.
So Ashley moved, Troy seconded to table this to June 1st with the expectation that Ashley will be consulting with Larry Mayo on the questions of her voting on this, and if she's not able to vote, how the rule of necessity applies on this. This is for the appointment of Robert Petrilli to building inspector for a term for 3 years.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Does the board want to table all the discussions until June 1st? We're not going to hit the deadline to post for Friday, and that's what this, having this meeting.
I would motion to approve the police chief today. Reappoint the police chief.
Make a motion to appoint. I would read out at the bottom, I would read out if you're going to make that motion.
I motion to reappoint police chief John Shaves, term expire on June 30th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Are there any others that you want to do today? Or do you want to hold all of them off until?
Town accountant, town council, veterans agent, fire inspector. Unless there's some conflict, I think we should vote on those.
Okay. Is there a motion for assistant building inspector, building inspector assistant?
I move it.
So Troy, you're moving that William Kelly be appointed as building inspector for a term to expire on June 30th, 2022.
As was stated.
Is there a second?
I second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Is there a motion for sealer of weights and measures?
Move it.
I second.
David Moore, sealer of weights and measures for a term to expire on June 30th, 2022. That's the motion?
Yes.
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye. Town accountant.
So Sandra Nola, town accountant, term to expire on June 30th, 2024. Is there a motion?
Move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Larry Mayo, town council, term to expire on June 30th, 2022. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay. Hearing no second, we'll move on. Wilfred Corey, veterans agent, term to expire on June 30th, 2022.
Move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Unanimous. Steve Peterson, wire inspector, term to expire on June 30th, 2022.
Move it.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Yep.
Dennis McCannis, wire inspector, assistant, term to expire on June 30th, 2022. Is there a motion?
Move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, in terms of town council, on the building commissioner, you've indicated how you want to handle that. You're tabling it to June 1st, and we'll return to that subject of the meeting on June 1st. What procedures do you want me to do regarding to town council? You, in the past, when we've had a change, the board has issued a request for proposals for legal services. Do you want me to do the same? If so, when would be the deadline for the response? I'm assuming that Attorney May would obviously be welcome to send in or response to the request for proposals, but I don't know what deadline you want me to follow and how you want to handle it from that point.
If you post it next week, you're not going to get it in today, right?
Well, the advertising, one of the weird things about legal services, it falls outside the state procurement law. So I don't have to advertise, for instance, in a local paper or in combis or goods and services. I probably would, for instance, the MMA bulletin, but also now it would be up on the town's website today. It would be, et cetera. I would do what I can do today. If the board if you want me to put it in the Express, I'm happy to put it in the Express. It would be next Friday. Usually for anything like an RFP or a job application, we try and wait 2 weeks till after it shows up in the Express. That would be, what, the 4th, 11th, 18th?
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Troy.
how is the fact that Ashley's going to consult with our council if we don't have one on board?
We have one on,
still
excuse me. Excuse me.
He's still appointed.
He's still appointed until June 30th. And going out and getting bids on legal services.
No, it won't be bids. You're getting
Well,
proposals.
Proposals.
And when do we propose to interview these individuals?
I think that's what Charlie was asking. With the 22nd?
I can do that. I mean, how much time do you want to leave for each interview?
Well, the last time the board interviewed legal firms, it held a special meeting. So you could hold a special meeting to interview and do half an hour for each one.
So what date would you like to do that then?
How about the 24th of June?
Should be. So I'm sure we don't have any conflicts. I suspect I'm going to come back to you all and simply say I want to carry over a lot more vacation at this point. But, we have nothing on the 24th right now in terms of other meetings or other appointments and such. So are you doing this daytime, evening?
What works for the board?
We should do it at night so more people can come and show up and listen.
Start at 6:30?
Sure.
Perfect.
Okay. And again, so how long for the interviews? In the terms of how many minutes do you want per firm?
I would say 30 minutes.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay. Is there anything else on the?
Well, I provided, as I mentioned, the schedule for the other two groups of people. These are the seats on the Board of Health, School Committee, and Finance Committee. The expectation was that we were going to be we'd schedule all the interviews for June 8th with a deadline date of June 2nd for submission of the talent bank forms. I don't know how long you wanted to vote for each candidate. In some cases, we may have one person who is interested in serving on one or more boards. Obviously, we're going to interview the person 2 or 3 times. I'll ask the Board of Health and the Elementary School Committee to attend the interviews that night, and that we would include a possible vote on filling the vacancies that night.
Okay.
We already have one Finance Committee member who's a reappointment situation. I think we're having 3, though I don't have a 3rd official letter indicating the vacancy, and we would deal with those. The Finance Committee has recommended 3 people. I don't know that they're going to be meeting they might meet on June 7th.
Okay.
If we get a talent bank form from anybody in between, I will schedule an interview with them, even if the Finance Committee hasn't had an interview yet. So that's that group there. Then for all the other unpaid volunteer positions, I would, after this meeting, begin the process of notifying those individuals that they can reapply for their positions on the boards and commissions. We would have a deadline date of, I believe, June 9th for submission of talent bank forms, and then you're scheduled right now for interviews with these people on June 15th. So I need to get an idea from the board, both for June 8th and June 15th, of how long you want to set aside for each interview. And also, the list of the unpaid positions is fairly lengthy. I'm not sure, for instance, whether you want all the police officers to come in as licensing agents, so you might want to take a quick glance at the list that Pam's provide and tell Pam and myself if there's any positions for which you do not need people to come in for interviews.
Okay. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, you haven't given me any direction.
I thought we already voted those.
Well, you did, but
So I thought we only reconsidered.
I would appreciate if you could just tell me, yes, we're doing it this way. I didn't hear any objections to what I was saying, but I want to make sure that this is what the board, I'm confirming with the board what they did on Tuesday. If it's right, that's fine. I'll move ahead with that.
Charlie, do you need to know right now if we're not going to call these people in? Is that what you're asking?
Well, yeah.
The groups of people?
Because the next meeting is June 8th, and you're doing it then.
Right.
So if you're not going to ask, for instance, the police officers to come in, then the schedule changes. If you're asking all these people to come in, including the police officers, for example, then we'll set up the agenda accordingly. I'll note, for instance, with the police officers, they probably would consider that to be on the job. So it would be a 3-hour minimum at overtime.
I would say we don't need the police officers or the matrons. That's my motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, otherwise I will follow what I've written out for the board for today's meeting.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
All right.
Okay.